I was a few feet away and he wanted to kill me. I had to shoot.
He was there just to put a bullet in her head to see the look on my face.
Hey, Alpha? How you doing?
Excuse me? Don't even get up.
A Milwaukee area 5-star rideshare driver, armed with a gun, survives a carjacking attempt. This headline was in the news not too long ago, and it begs the question, should you carry a gun while you're driving? How should you carry while you're driving? And what a self-defense incident on the road may actually look like. In this video, we're breaking down that carjacking with the man himself and how he survived it. But before we get into that, I'll let you know we have a gun giveaway going on. It's happening right now. It is absolutely free, but it ends really soon. So click the link in the description down below to learn which brand new gun you could win. Hi, I'm Kevin Michalowski, Director of Content for the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. And I'm here with Scott Jaworowski.
Correct.
Got it good this time. And his attorney, Amy. Scott, we really wanted to talk to you about this incident. It happened right in our backyard. We're at our headquarters here in West Bend, and it was all over the news because you got good video on it. That's how it made the news. And we watched that video and we broke it down. But I want to get started first is, do you carry every day? And how long have you had your permit? And tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started down this path.
Sure. I do carry every day, whether when I'm out on the road, whether I'm just out doing my business on a day-to-day basis. I do carry every day. I feel it's important to not only exercise my Second Amendment rights, but also to be able to protect myself and my family when we're out and about.
What sort of training did you get before you started carrying?
None really. I had gone ahead and I had bought my gun. I'd used guns for years. I'd grown up around rifles and shotguns, and I'd shot handguns a number of times over the years. When concealed carry became available in Wisconsin, I signed up for it pretty shortly after at that point. So I could go ahead and concealed carry legally at that point.
So in watching the video, I see that these two men get in the back seat of your car and almost immediately press something against your back of your neck, behind you. Tell me how you felt at that moment and what was going through your mind.
When the guy behind me on the right-hand side got into the car at first, I didn't think anything else of it. It was like a normal passenger getting into the car. It wasn't until he jumped me from behind and started pressing something into the back of my neck that I realized this was no longer a normal rideshare event. And at that point, I decided, okay, I needed to do something. I didn't know what they were going to do. I didn't know what he was pressing into the back of my neck. It turns out it was a cell phone, but at the time I had no idea of what it was, so I wasn't sure, if he was armed or not. I had his friend at the driver's side door was trying to pull me out of the car while he was trying to push me out of the car. My seatbelt was still on at that point in time.
So from a situational awareness standpoint, did you have your door locked? I mean, were you thinking about stuff like this prior to it happening?
When I saw them walk up, it looked like a normal ride share. The only difference to it being is they were masked, which given COVID, everybody's masked. And the only other thing that struck me as a little odd was they weren't making eye contact with me as I came up. But again, not in something that was really ringing too many alarm bells for me.
Was there that sequence of what's happening? This is not happening. Oh yeah, this is happening. How long did it take your brain to get through all of that?
It was a very quick reaction on my part. I've done martial arts for a number of years, so I'm used to thinking quickly. I was able to mainly try and delay them. My talking to them, yelling at them while this was going on, was trying to get them delayed to the point where I could reach one of my firearms.
I'm assuming that at this point, you were genuinely fearful that you were in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm. Is that a
that is
statement?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So keeping your wits about you, what was the first thing you were thinking as you tried to diffuse this situation as best you could?
I knew that given the fact that I was still seat belted into the car, I needed to be able to be mobile in order to be able to really be able to defend myself well. If I'm strapped into the car and if one of them has a gun, I'm a trapped captive, at that point in time. So once the gentleman behind me popped my seatbelt off and pulled my knife out of my pocket, at that point it was, okay, I can move, I can go, and I reached and grabbed my gun.
How and where do you carry guns in your vehicle?
Typically, I have one in the door panel where it's easily accessible from my left hand. That day, I had another gun in a carry case because I'd been to the range, and that was on the floor by my feet, covered by a lightweight flannel shirt.
Which gun did you reach for? Which gun did you get hold of to stop this attack?
The one that I got a hold of was the one that was in the door panel because it was unholstered, live, safety off.
Now, I'm going to suggest, and then I tell everybody, you always should have a gun in a holster, especially in an off-body carry position, but you've got this in your door panel. Please, please, please tell me that you had this. There's nothing else in there. The gun was in there all by itself.
The gun was in there all by itself with a candy wrapper, I think. Okay. So
I'll let you go on the candy wrapper because I don't think that's going to be stout enough to actuate the trigger. Why do you carry in the door panel? Why do you put it there?
Mainly due to the policy of no weapons. So my philosophy is, protection of myself first and foremost, and then my family and anybody else that I may need to. But having those firearms there and accessible is part of that. Mm-hmm. I also realize that there are people who don't necessarily feel the same way, so I keep them out of sight. So having them in that door panel, it's protected. Only I can reach it, and passengers, it's out of sight from them. So.
And absolutely. I'm a huge advocate of not giving anybody a chance to make a plan to get my gun. So if you're thinking ahead that this is out of sight and still active for you to get. Now let's get a little bit more into the incident. There's some yelling, there's some screaming, you're thinking about what you're going to do. At what point did you look down, or did you know the gun was there, or did you say, okay, it's time for me to grab this gun and put an end to this?
My original thought when they first came in and started attacking me was I need to get to my gun because I felt the guy behind me poking me with whatever. I was afraid for my life at that point. I didn't know what else was going to happen. So I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to survive the situation. When my seatbelt got popped off, I knew I would be able to reach the gun at that point because the door to my car was open. I couldn't reach it while I was still strapped in. As I stood up, I grabbed the gun. I brought it up on center on the guy standing outside. He threw up his hands, screamed, and ran off in the opposite direction. And then I pointed the gun inside the car at the gentleman in there, and he screamed and ran off as well. You can't really get to your gun in its door panel frame with the door closed? I'm just kind of... With the door closed, I can.
Okay.
But the door was open because the gentleman outside the car had flung the door open trying to pull me out. So it's now 5 or 6 feet away from me, and while I have really long arms, they're not quite.
Yeah, when I first met you, I thought they picked the wrong guy that they're gonna go after. What made you decide not to shoot?
As soon as they ran away, their backs were to me. They were running away. They were no longer at that moment, viable threat.
Scott, I want to talk to you again about why you didn't shoot at the guy inside the car. I understand, we talked about the guy outside, threw his hands in the air and screamed and ran away. Now we're looking at, quite possibly, and you have your attorney, it's Amy Scholes.
Yep.
Amy Scholes is here with you, so I want to make sure that you don't say anything that's going to get you in any trouble, and I'm sure Amy doesn't want you to say anything that's going to get you in any trouble. But a lot of folks, and we talk about the Castle Doctrine protections in your vehicle, and here's some guys who are in your vehicle, and Amy, I'll go right to you on this one. Does Castle Doctrine protect you when you're inside, or provide you that basis of protection? I know I don't want to say protect you, but is Castle Doctrine covering you when you're in your car?
It can in certain circumstances, but in this case, because these two individuals were invited into the car, they're not breaking in, and so as a result, Castle Doctrine wouldn't apply then.
Okay, so did you know that at the time?
I did not know that at the time. Okay. My initial thought was they've surrendered. They've got their back to me. They're running away, and again, at that point, they're no longer a threat to me in that moment.
Good, clear-headed thinking, and I always tell people the best fight is the one you're not in. If somebody's going to run away, let them run away. What did you do immediately following the incident? Okay, the guys are gone, and you get this, now maybe it's a 1 second time to go, okay, that's over, but then what happened?
After the guy in the back seat ran off, I walked around to the back of my car. He had left the passenger side door open on that rear side. So I walked around. I noticed in the back seat he had dropped his cell phone, or not his cell phone, his car keys, his house keys, and some other stuff that was on a lanyard. So I reached in, I grabbed that by the lanyard. I closed the passenger door while keeping my eyes on the direction that they had ran off in to see if they were possibly going to come back. I walked back around to the driver's side, got into the car, started to drive off and called 911 at that point. The reality kind of sunk in once I got to the gas station and waited for the police to get there. And it was just kind of a, holy crap type of moment. Did that really happen?
And you said you left the scene of the incident.
I did.
And how far did you go?
I drove about a half mile from where the incident occurred to the nearest gas station where I could park in a kind of an open, lit up area and wait for the police to show up.
And did the police have any problem with you leaving the scene of the incident?
No, absolutely not. Yeah, dispatcher, when I told her I was leaving the area to go to someplace where it was safer, she said, okay, that was perfectly fine, and to just wait there for the police to show up.
How was your interview with the police? How did that go? And talk to me about specifically what they did with your gun.
Police showed up at the gas station and started talking to me, trying to figure out, A, identify who I was, B, figure out what happened. I, presented my identification to them and my CCW permit. And at that time, they asked for the handguns. They just moved them to the back of one of the squad cars, or squad SUVs, so they could just kind of keep them safe for that point in time, secure. And then they proceeded to go ahead with the investigation, getting the rest of the interview from me. I pulled the SIM card from my dash cam and presented that to them and helped them figure out where the videos were that they were looking for on there. And two officers showed up about 15, 20 minutes later to take me back to where the incident occurred. And then they brought me back to the gas station, and they continued to fingerprint my vehicle, and that was about it.
Amy, is there anything that he did right or wrong in that interaction with police, as he tells you about it right now? Should he have given his SIM card, or do you want to keep that? I know that, and I'm a police officer. I like people to tell me everything that happened. But I'm also editor of Concealed Carry Magazine, so I'm going to tell you not to talk to guys like me. And Amy's probably going to give you that same advice. But based on what he just told you there.
Right. Look, this situation turned out as well as it possibly could have under these circumstances. As an attorney, I would advise no. We don't make statements to police without an attorney present. We don't provide that information without an attorney present, or certainly without at least consulting with an attorney first. Obviously, in this situation, Scott did everything right, and ultimately that has been shown with all of that evidence that the police were able to obtain and that Scott provided to them. Generally speaking, we would advise talking to an attorney first, but in this situation, it did ultimately work out.
Yeah, and what I've told people about, I'm trying to strike that perfect balance between cops and the good guys with a gun. I'm grateful that you were able to provide information to the police to help them advance that investigation. But at any point, did you feel like you were being asked, what we will call guilt-seeking questions, something like that?
No, actually, to the contrary. The officers were very amicable. There was never any hint of probing questions that might have been turned against me in any way. And then as one of the investigators was driving off, she, actually went so far as to call out the window of her vehicle to me to, thank you for, exercising your Second Amendment rights.
Oh, great. That's nice to hear. I've got another follow-up, but it looks like
Sure.
you got something.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment that, these officers, it seemed from the start through Scott's interaction with them, understood that he was truly the victim in this situation and that he had done everything correctly as he should have. The problem is Scott had just been through a very traumatic situation. And while he wasn't intentionally feeling any effects or intentionally trying to say something incorrect, you just never know what you might say. You might get a location wrong. You might get a time wrong. You might have a misperception of what actually happened, that when you go back and look in that video, it's very different than what you remember because, again, you're physically going through the situation, I'm sure it felt like much longer to Scott in the moment than it actually took when you watch it on video. And if he had given that incorrect information, however innocent that mistake may have been, it could have led to a pretty problematic situation with the police now questioning, well, why did you give us this incorrect information? And now we're in a much stickier situation.
Yeah. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that all of this changes if Scott had fired even one round.
Oh,
at these
absolutely.
guys.
This would have been a very different discussion.
Yeah. And at that point, if you had fired your gun, you as his attorney would be advising him, nope, tell him you'll make a statement later. What would you have told him to do if in that situation?
Sure. Well, in any situation, even in the situation that Scott is in currently, the advice is, look, you need to have a long and very truthful and serious conversation with an attorney before you're making any statements on the record to anyone about what happened in that situation, because you did everything that you thought you were supposed to do correctly, and you may have done everything correctly, but we don't know how the police are going to look at things. We don't know how a prosecutor may look at things. We don't know if they find these people, what they're going to say, and what evidence they may have to support or not support whatever statements were made. So it's important that before you're making any statements to police, you have that opportunity to talk to an attorney, talk about everything that happened. Why did I make the decisions that I made? What was I experiencing in those moments? So that you have that opportunity to take a breath, let's get my wits about me, and then have that conversation.
And I like the one thing you said in there, why did I make the decision that I made? And Scott, my advice to everybody is if you have the option, don't shoot. Because when the hammer falls, that changes everything. It makes a completely different situation. Is there anything that you might have done differently now that you look back on this situation?
I don't really think so, given the fact that, I would have, I assumed that they were legitimate passengers. Mm-hmm. So as Amy has mentioned, I'm inviting them into my vehicle at that point in time. And I do that on a nightly basis on the nights I'm out driving.
On the follow-up of this, now that this is all over, do you do anything differently as far as firearms training, self-defense training, situational awareness? Has it changed your day-to-day outlook in any way?
I'm still very much, I still train, as about as often as I have done in the past. About the only change to that is I don't go and shoot at the range as much as I used to due to the cost of ammo. I bought a laser system, so I use that down in the basement and run through that probably more now than I would have if I had to go to the range and shoot. Also, I did a lot of mental training. Doing the rideshare thing, got a lot of downtime in between rides where I'm driving around. And so I play the what if game in my head. If this happens, what do I do? What if this happens? And so a lot of that comes into play in terms of being able to mentally prepare myself for those types of situations.
And Kevin, one thing that Scott didn't mention, but from his level of preparation here, is his education about what his rights are and how he should be proceeding in these types of situations. We have Scott, who's a father of 5, who was presented with a situation that all of us hope we never are presented with, but based on his knowledge, on his training, and on his ability to know where those rights start and stop and what he should do and what he shouldn't do. We have a perfect situation here where he was able to avoid the dangers of these 2 people attempting to cause him harm, certainly reasonable fear of that death or great bodily harm. So he was able to utilize the self-defense laws and protect himself and get out of this unscathed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess I would be remiss in not mentioning that you are a member of the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. How long have you been a member?
I was a member from about 2 months or so after I got my concealed carry license and started carrying. I saw an ad online and started looking into it, not realizing that we're based here out of Wisconsin, but I thought it was a very wise decision, very logical and kind of a no-brainer type of situation.
Has the USCCA provided you any sort of information or training that came to mind either before or during this incident? I mean, how did we help you?
I've watched a number of the videos off the USCCA website, just in general training on preparation, things to be aware of and careful of for the gotchas that may be out there of, when when you should choose to fire, when you shouldn't choose to fire. A lot of the articles out of the CCM magazine as well. So I have read through a number of those as well about some of the lessons learned, shall we say, from other people around the country.
Yeah, our true stories are probably one of the most popular segments in the magazine, and I always tell people that if there is any takeaway, the deadly force decision-making information that we provide about not only when should you engage an attacker, but when you can do so legally and what's going to happen afterwards. Well, I really want to thank you both for being here, Amy and Scott, for helping us out with this and talking us through this. It's been very insightful, and I'm super happy you made it out okay, and there's nothing, no bad results of this in any way, shape, or form. And again, for giving of your time and helping us out. Thank you very much.
He was there just to put a bullet in her head, just to see the look on my face.
Back had his hoodie really, really tight. The guy in the front had his hoodie a little bit looser. And I looked at what he was holding. That's a .45 caliber 1911.
Hi, I'm Kevin Michalowski, Director of Content for the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. The short video clip that you just saw is a true story about how two people got attacked when they went out to eat. I'm going to play the full video for you in just a second. But that guy you saw, his name is BJ Baldwin, and he is a 7-time off-road racing champion, and he's a defensive pistol practitioner. If you're new to this channel, you must remember that simply owning a gun does not prepare you for armed self-defense. What we do here at the U.S. Concealed Carry Association is give responsibly armed Americans the education and training they need to avoid danger. And while watching this short video clip, I want you to mentally envision a scenario. And what would you do if you were jumped at a local restaurant?
He didn't want any money, he didn't want the car or anything like that, and they didn't ask for anything. He was there just to put a bullet in her head, just to see the look on my face. My name is BJ Baldwin. I'm a professional off-road racer. Aside from that, I'm also a defensive pistol practitioner and a father of 2. My son just turned 12 years old, and my daughter is 3 years old. Both my kids, they have a lot of fun with Tori, with the lifestyle, relationship that's as colorful as mine. She's been like a team member. So that night, we ended up going to In-N-Out and drove through the drive-through. We ate in the parking lot. As soon as we got done eating, we stepped out of the car to get some fresh air. We're cooped up in the house like this whole time during quarantine, and cars started to leave. People were just finishing eating and getting ready to go home. About 60 seconds after the last car left the parking lot, I heard Tori whisper, BJ, 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 like, aggressively in distress. Looked at the last known location, she's not there. I scan the parking lot, I see 2 people in the parking lot. At the time, I don't even know if I thought if they were male or female, or whether they're coming or going, or what they were doing. She kept whispering. And I looked towards my car, and it sounds like it's coming from my car. Well, she was in my car with the door open and sitting with her legs out of the driver's seat with her feet on the ground. She stood up, walked around the driver's door and in the front bumper, and she looks like terrified. She looks over there in the distance and looks at me and then looks back, and that's all the communication I got from her. The guy in the back had his hoodie really, really tight. The guy in the front had his hoodie a little bit looser, and you could see his head was tilted and he was smiling. And I looked at what he was holding. Once I ran up his extremity, I'm like, that's a .45 caliber 1911. And this is not a fist fight. This is a gunfight. I can either wait for a counter-ambush opportunity, I can create a counter-ambush opportunity, or I could just go and take the hits and see what happens. The counter-ambush opportunity that I got is he looked at me, he was smiling really big at her, smiled at me, and he said something in the nature like, what's good, and then went back In the process of him trying to point the weapon and try and orient it back at her, he was going to have to decelerate using all these various muscle groups, and that was going to be my opportunity to make the best out of a bad situation, because I knew I was going to get shot at. I knew there was a pretty good chance I was going to get shot. At that moment, I said, listen, go slow. Take your time and get your hits. And it'll be the fastest thing he's ever seen in his life. I stepped to the left 2 steps to get behind my available cover, which was very low quality in reality, although my brain was tricking me into thinking it was very high quality cover. I drew in the process of moving to cover, and I cranked off my first round to engage the threat. I wasn't going to let him get any closer to Tori. Tori was unarmed, absolutely petrified, and running for cover. After he engaged Tori twice, he began to engage me and fired at me multiple times. As soon as I engaged the man with the gun, the second guy ran faster than I've ever seen anybody run in my life. I continued trying to save Tori's life, save my life, and continued to engage the threat until the threat was no longer a threat. Obviously, I never wanted that to happen, but if it came to that, I'm going home to my kids.
If you have a gun for self-defense, you need to hear this to avoid making a mistake that could land you in jail. My daughter was a few feet away and he wanted to kill me. I had to shoot. I never thought I'd get locked up and charged with murder. I've decided to tell my story because if you have a gun for self-defense, you need to hear this to avoid making a mistake that could land you in jail, or worse. Here's what happened. I found out my family member was attacked and assaulted the previous night, so I went to help her. We were in the entryway when the attacker came back. So I did, what anyone would do. I positioned myself between them. I wanted to de-escalate the situation, get him out of there, and keep her safe. This guy was angry. He wouldn't listen. And when he tried to rush in to get past me, I kicked him back down the steps. So he ran away, and I ran to the truck to get my phone. I still remember looking in and seeing my daughter's face before I started dialing 911. That's when the attacker came back, and he was holding a metal pipe. So I threw my phone on the seat, and I grabbed my gun. I didn't have a choice. This guy is nuts, and he's gonna try to kill me and hurt my family. And seeing the gun didn't faze him. I drew on him, I yelled, "Stop or I'll shoot," but he ran straight at me. Look, I never thought this would happen to me. I never wanted to shoot someone. When the police showed up, things just went bad. I thought they were doing their job, but I was handcuffed and taken to the station. Within hours, despite my testimony and my family's, I was charged with first-degree murder. I was sitting in jail. I was desperate. I was praying. And all of a sudden, it hit me. I remembered I had this membership in the U.S. Concealed Carry Association. And I remembered it includes help from the critical response team. I was able to pass a message to a family member, and they called for me. That one call changed everything. They immediately connected me with an attorney from the USCCA Attorney Network, and he went right to work on my case. He drove to the jail to meet me, and he worked hard to connect the dots the detectives had missed. It took a long time and obviously took a toll on the family, but he finally got all the charges dropped. In the end, the attorney fees were $68,500. I don't know what I would have done if I had to pay for it all out of pocket. Honestly, if I didn't have a USCCA membership, I think I'd still be in jail awaiting trial, or in prison convicted of a crime I didn't commit. Getting to hold my daughter again, I'll never forget that moment. Keeping my family safe is my first duty as a father. But to do it right means you've got to train and be prepared. Now I tell every gun owner I know, they need to have the 24/7 critical response team on speed dial. Ask yourself, What if you were forced to defend your loved ones today? What if you had to press the trigger? If there's even a slight chance you might have to someday, then you need the powerful resources of USCCA membership.
After watching that video, you must understand how important training and education are to a gun owner. It's much more than just carrying a gun. It's about being prepared mentally and physically. And if you're looking for top-notch self-defense education and training, the U.S. Concealed Carry Association can help you. If you're a gun owner, or even if you're not, and this sounds interesting to you, click the link below to learn more. I'm Kevin Michalowski, Director of Content for the USCCA. If you enjoy these videos, please subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and click on that notification bell so you won't miss any of our future videos. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next video.